Alright, good evening. I'm going to bring you through one of my edits here. This is from a session that I did just the other night. So I do have a custom action set up here that will set up a bunch of layers. You'll see when I run this, it creates a bunch of layers, but I could turn this on and off and nothing happens. Alright, and so we're going to go down through and we're just going to start with our healing layer. We'll do a little bit of dodging and burning. We'll do a few other things and then we'll come back. So first thing we're going to do is just kind of clean up our image here. We do have a few dust spots that we want to get rid of. And I can see those here and here, here. So all I'm doing is running around. This is all in the background. I don't have to be very accurate here. All I'm doing is taking off a few of these spots in the image on the sensor. Alright, I probably just need to clean that up so I don't have to worry about this next time. Alright, just kind of keep note where things are, and that way you can blow things and all your sensor off correctly when you get in there. So I do have a pad, a Wacom tablet here. So I'm going to use this. Normally I just keep it on, change brush size, and come in here, make sure that you're on your healing layer. All this is a blank layer, and there's nothing special about this. And then just start painting out the bigger blotches. You don't have to be super touchy here, just the things that won't come out very nicely when you do your dodging and burning. Things like hairs, little skin lines, anything that you just want to get rid of. Sometimes clone stamp will work better for this. A lot of times the healing brush worked just fine though. So I'm just going to come through here and clean up just a few things, the things that stick out to me from this zoom level. Alright, so now I've got to deal with this microphone. We were doing a little YouTube series, and hope was that we'd have some conversation and I would post some of that. I think we got some good videos out of that. I am working on those, and they're going to take a little bit longer to post those. So this one will probably go up before we get the other one up. So I just need to paint out these chords. If I take my time here and just work through all these little sections, it should clean up pretty good. Especially around these edges are going to be the harder parts, and once you get consistency in there, we're going to be okay. And we might have to use the clone stamp in a few of these places here. Not too bad. Yeah, see, like right in there. I decided to grab skin instead of grab the other. I can try the healing brush again. Sometimes we'll find, and it's not. Alright, so we'll come back in there with the clone tool, and then we'll heal it back up to blend things back in. And I'm not liking the skin there either. Just too blurred for my liking. So we're going to go ahead and continue up here though, and then we'll come back and we'll use the other tool. And the good thing about this being another layer is if I mess it up too bad, I can always grab from the under layer, just erase and try again. Always work non-destructively when you can, and that means don't paint over something on the same layer, and you want to make sure that you can always go back to your original. This is doing a very good job at matching up those holes here on this shirt. I'm very impressed with that. Alright, so now we're back to an edge again. So probably need to be selective on how we get rid of this and what areas we do at a time. That way it's consistent with the textures it's using. Oh, fantastic. That did a great job. Awesome. We'll just clean up a few of these areas here. We can come back over with a clone stamp and get some of that skin texture back in there. So now let's try doing right up against where this line of the shirt's going to go, and we're going to hope that it grabs the right stuff here. It's not. Alright, so let's try getting rid of this shirt area here first. Yeah. Unfortunately not. So I think this is the point where we need to switch over to our clone stamp tool here. We'll give it something to work with, and then we'll paint over the top with it with a heel brush. So all I'm doing here is trying to grab like textures, or grab from both sides. If you notice, my flow is set to 17%. So I got to go over each area, a few times before it really takes 100%. This helps with blending in colors and textures as you transition over, right? Because this is a bad spot for this, because this is at a corner or a curve in the body, so you're going to have a lot of texture changes. You're going to have a lot of just brightness changes and other things going on here. So I'm just grabbing light textures nearby. I'm going to paint this in a little bit here. And again, if they're like that there, you could have probably left, right? It was not a temporary thing. There's definitely a balance between going too overboard with retouching and not doing enough. And that's something I think everyone struggles with, and you just kind of have to work your way through and find your own style, right? We could probably leave this. This is part of a tattoo there, but just clean that up. And I'm not seeing anything else large that is bothering me. So we'll move on to dodging and burning the skin. There is some discoloration here. We had tried on some other tops earlier. We'll try painting that out with a color layer before we go on too far. Now the other trick here is this gradient layer. When you're doing your dodging and burning, and it's easier to see differences in tones, and when you have your black and white layer on. If you can notice, there's a pretty good contrast right here where she's smiling in the dimple. You got a little more dark spot here. You got some color change tones in there. It's not easily, especially like this one here, to see some of these as defined in the color, right? If you take that out of your vision, it's easier to see and it's easier to work with if you're trying to tone some of that stuff out. So let's go ahead and start with that. So those are the next two layers up. Your dodging layer, all it is a curves layer set to luminosity, and we're just going to paint things in. So this dodge is going to light things up, so anything that is too dark, you'll end up painting over with white. If you go too far, you just paint back over with black and it'll bring it back down. This one I do recommend going down to 1%. A little bit of paint will go a long way. You don't want to take out all the definition. In certain areas you even want to put some definition back, but if certain things just kind of catch your eye, you can easily start taking them out a little bit and working towards evening some of those skins. I recommend start out a little bit further and then you can zoom in and work some of the finer details. Again, like anything else, try different zoom levels. Don't stay at one for too long, because what you'll find is sometimes, especially when you're working in close, and it looks perfect from the zoom level you're in, but when you zoom back out, you realize that you're creating some other issues, right? So I don't know what that little line was from, but we've just painted it out. And if you notice, as I'm painting here, you're not seeing a ton of changes as I'm doing it, but it all adds up over time. So you want to keep things pretty light, right? And build up slowly over time and bounce back and forth. And as you're doing it, don't spend a ton of time in one area, and let your eyes float around the image. See what's capturing your eye as far as, in this case here, dark spots go. I went a little too far there. I'm going to undo that one. And I'll turn this layer on and off in a second, and you'll see, even at 1%, how big of a difference this makes over time. You can take a little bit broader strokes too. Why am I rotating? There we go. Oops. So, there we go. Let's get rid of this big dark patch over here. And this is going to take a little bit, and you can start out big and then bring it in, and you have a good feather to this too. All right, so just keep that in mind too, and go smaller than what you think you need to start. Right, I'm going to take some broad strokes right through here. We'll add a little definition back. That was a rather abrupt stop for whatever reason. I'll do a little here. Alright, so I think that's going to be it. This zoom level, we'll zoom in a little bit further, but you can see, you know, I've just been taking broad strokes at 1%. Look how much of a difference that makes. It's much cleaner already. Now let's go ahead and zoom in, and we're going to keep on working at this a little bit. Spend a lot of time on this, and this is where you make or break your image. And the good thing about doing it in this method versus, you know, using automated tools or frequency separation or skin blurring like portraiture, any of those other, you know, kind of popular burn and turn type or wedding photographer type tools, is you lose the detail, you lose the pores in the skin. You realize that when you zoom in, it doesn't look real anymore, it looks retouched. You can't, it doesn't look natural, right? Whereas you keep this, you do this, you still have it, you're preserving that texture, and you still see the skin, you're just taking the edges off of things, right? You can't tell nearly as well, or in that it's been retouched at all, right? And probably spend a good amount of time here. I'd spend about 50% of your time in the dodging burning phase, and this is huge. The more you get comfortable with it, and the easier this becomes. You know, if you have a lot of time, spend more time here. If you don't, then don't. And a few other things you can do is you can swap back and forth between these dodges and burning. So burning is the opposite, makes things darker. It's exactly the same way. So as you're running across the things, like that light line didn't belong, you know, and you swap back and forth, especially at the zoom level. All right, you don't want to lighten everything up to the lighter level necessarily, right? Sometimes, and come in here with a darkening tool and bring in, you know, some darker tones so that you're evening things out, right? Sometimes it can be counterintuitive, especially when you're working around the eyes, you know, everyone get rid of the dark circles, get rid of the dark circles. There's almost so much you can pull down, but if you pull up the surrounding area and at the same time, then you know, you get that blending, and there's not as much of a difference between the two, and it doesn't look like dark circles anymore, right? So go ahead and spend some time here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and either skip forward or speed this up, and we'll come back to the audio in a minute. All right. Now, and that is that for that part. You know, you can come back and look at a few other things later in the process and retouch up further. Like I see, like this is still bothering me a little bit here. These two here are gonna have deep shadow enhance, deep shadow, or specular highlight enhance. So, these here are exactly the same thing. They are luminosities. They are just a higher curve than what the other one is. And if you double click into these, they also have underlining layer cuts, so it only affects the highlights and the shadows. And if you tried painting this specular highlight onto a shadow area, it wouldn't do anything because the underlying layer would cut it out. Makes it very useful for brightening things like teeth, eyes, or other things, so it won't affect the iris, but it'll affect the lighter parts of the iris, right, or around it, right, the veins or whatever. Also works great for jewelry and other things. And the deep shadow enhances exactly the opposite. If there's textures that you want to kind of deepen, and this is a good way to do those textures as well. You don't need to do a lot. You don't want to make this obvious. There are a couple areas like I mentioned earlier that I wanted to color correct, like here, a little bit here, a little bit right in here. It's just red from the previous top. I don't have a layer for color correcting on this, but if you create a new layer, go to color. You gotta be gentle when you're doing this, because there's a whole bunch of things besides just color that will take effect here. And you want to keep sampling from around the different areas and paint in very gently with a very low brush. In this case, I'm using 1%. If you notice, you can slowly see this changing. It's not going to be a perfect color match to the area around it unless you also do luminosity and saturation with it. We're going to stick with this for right now. And so you can see, if you look at those three spots we just retouched, it takes a lot of that red out of there. Probably do one for saturation as well. You can try this a couple ways. So instead of creating a brand new layer, let's delete this layer. Where's my delete here? Right here. You can duplicate your color layer here, and let's just go to saturation, and then it's going to take exactly what you had painted in before, and it's going to use that. I think that actually looks pretty decent. You can adjust this as well. You know, if you think you need to paint in a little bit more to get rid of that saturation. Luminosity will affect things like the texture. We shouldn't need to do anything with that. The texture on this is pretty good. I might pull a little more red out of here, but not much. Again, make sure you're constantly sampling around just to make sure your colors are matching across. Don't be afraid to go over your red area either, because anything that you're doing here will just help to blend those in a little. And that is about that. So if you want black and white at this point, a couple ways you can go about it. You can apply your own custom LUTs. You can just go to the black and white. You could play with a black and white slider, and I have something called infinite black and white. Well, this is cool, is I can just kind of click through until I find one that I like, and then make some fine-tune adjustments on it. Alright, so I'll go through, and what it's doing is it's creating a group with a bunch of layers in it, and mixing different colors and pulling things back and forward, so you get, you know, variations between something more contrasty and, let's see if we can't find one that's the opposite, right? But you're getting multiple looks within a couple clicks until you find one that you really like.